Hello and welcome to my presentation on Lyndon B. Johnson, the 36th President of the United States. Early life. LBJ, or Lyndon B. Johnson, was born on August 27, 1908 to Sam and Rebecca Baines Johnson. He was born in Stonewall, Texas, and was the first of 5 children. LBJ had one brother, Sam Houston Johnson, and 3 sisters, Rebecca, Josepha, and Lucia. His mother was reserved and stayed at home to care for the family, while his father was an outspoken farmer who eventually served 5 terms in Texas legislature. By 1913, he moved to Johnson City, which was part of an area known as Texas Hill Country, which is an impoverished rural area. Their family was so poor that their house didn't even have running water or electricity. Like many other students from the area, he first attended a one-room schoolhouse, though later he graduated from Johnson City High School in 1924. He was one of 6 in his senior class and he was only 15 years old. A fun fact was back when LBJ was 12, he told another boy at school that he would become president one day. Adult life. After high school, LBJ was a drifter, though his family scrimped together money to try to send him to college. Ultimately, though, he failed securing a spot in Southwest Texas State Teachers College. So, with 5 friends, he bought a car and drove to California where he worked odd jobs and got into fighting and drinking, which eventually led to his arrest. Soon, though, LBJ had enough of his life in California and hitchhiked all the way back to Texas and finally got accepted into Southwest Texas State Teachers College in 1927. He started teaching at an impoverished small Hispanic school and started getting into extracurricular activities like journalism and student government/debate. This stint at Southwest Texas State Teachers College really opened his eyes to politics, and he began to leave his teaching ambitions behind. Eventually, he got the job as an aide to U.S. Congressman Richard Kleberg of Corpus Christi. His work ethic was amazing, and he was described as leaving no mail unopened and was an exemplary assistant. Soon, though, in 1934, LBJ returned to Texas and met 21-year-old Claudia Alta Taylor. She was from a wealthy family, and they married only 3 months later. A couple years after their marriage and after Congressman James Buchanan's death, LBJ took money from his wife and began to campaign. Doing so, he secured the spot as congressman in Texas's 10th district, his home district. He was only 28 years old at the time. He did wonders during his stint as congressman, and by the late 30s, he won federal housing projects and electrical power for his home Texas Hill Country, which he described as his greatest achievement. Soon, though, the U.S. entered World War II, and after contacting Roosevelt, LBJ secured a spot as an officer in the Naval Reserve. During this time, LBJ worked 2 jobs, as congressman and also as a naval officer. He watched over the war in the Pacific and even earned a Silver Star after his only combat mission, which was the supervision of a bombing run over Lae, New Guinea. LBJ was also very lucky at this time, as he had to take a bathroom break, which caused him to miss his spot on the Wabash cannonball, which was shot down on the mission. LBJ instead boarded another B-26 bomber. Around this time, his wife, popularly known as Lady Bird, also gave birth to his 2 daughters, and LBJ finally began investing and earning his own money instead of mooching off his wife. Soon, after World War II, LBJ began running for U.S. Senate, though his campaign was very controversial as it was rifled with fraud and his credibility took a hit. Though he did secure the spot, and once he became senator, he wooed powerful members, made crucial alliances, and after Democrats became the House majority, LBJ assumed the position of majority leader. After his political success in Senate, LBJ then contemplated running for U.S. president. He chose to ally himself with the very popular Dwight D. Eisenhower instead of making enemies with him, and continued working with other senators, giving them what was known as the Johnson treatment. He would charm them with his sweet talk and flattery until he guaranteed their support. Though all this sweet talk couldn't save his heart, and in 1955, LBJ was hit with a heart attack. He quit smoking, lost weight, and began delegating work to other senators. However, his drive never stopped, and he passed the Civil Rights Act of 1957, which protected against the interference of voting rights. This is not to be confused with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which LBJ is most known for. Soon, LBJ then teamed up with John F. Kennedy, and they began running for president. With LBJ's older, more mature nature and JFK's younger charm, the two began their campaign throughout the nation. Without LBJ's background as a Southern Protestant, Kennedy was sure to lose as he was a Catholic and liberal. LBJ used his background to turn the tides in crucial Southern states, and JFK was sworn in as president and LBJ as his vice. Unfortunately, in November 1963, as everybody knows, JFK was assassinated campaigning in Texas by Lee Harvey Oswald, and LBJ was sworn in as the president 2 weeks later. After ascension to the White House, LBJ was even quoted as saying, "All that I would have given gladly to not to be standing here today." Though LBJ didn't have much time to grieve and took the reins of presidency quickly. Significance of LBJ: Domestic Affairs. As president, LBJ began to enact his agenda known as the Great Society. LBJ began tackling many things such as environmental protection, educational inequality, and urban development. LBJ poured millions of dollars into conservation efforts, support for impoverished schools such as the ones he attended in his youth, and the fixing and building of new highways. Johnson even won passage for Medicare, which is a federal program that provides health care to the elderly. LBJ also started the War on Poverty and started the CAA, or the Community Action Agency. This agency went out to impoverished communities to supervise other agencies that provided social services, mental health services, and employment services. Thanks to LBJ, federal spending that helped the impoverished doubled from 6 to 12 billion between 1965 and 1968, and by the time of his death in 1974, it doubled to 24.5 billion. Most importantly, LBJ began to work on civil rights. Taking up Kennedy's commitment, LBJ passed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 in front of millions of Americans, which made it illegal to segregate based on race in America. Even though the aforementioned Civil Rights Act of 1957 was supposed to guarantee voting rights, this was not true in the South. Due to rigged literacy tests, good character tests, and poll taxes, blacks and poor whites in the South could not vote. LBJ passed the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which ended the literacy tests and sent marshals and registrars down to the South to help black men vote. This was very successful, and the amount of black people voting tripled within 4 years, and this almost passed the white voter turnout in the South. This also allowed blacks to join the Democratic Party, and this formed biracial coalitions. Furthermore, LBJ began pushing for an end to segregated housing, and even though at first this was not very successful, the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King pushed this bill over the edge, and the law began opening up American suburbs to black residents. Foreign Affairs. LBJ, who was caught up with Kennedy's involvement in the Vietnam War, was lost on what to do. Hawks, as they were known in the American government, wanted all-out war with bombings of North Vietnam and possible use of nuclear weapons. Doves, who were more passive, wanted negotiations and eventual reunification of both Vietnams. This was unfortunate, as the Vietnam War cut LBJ's popularity harshly, and his approval ratings dropped from 70% to a meager 40%. This was further exacerbated by LBJ's involvement in Latin America, and after the quelling of a rebellion in the Panama Canal Zone and the deposition of Reed Cabral in the Dominican Republic, he was largely unpopular. It is ironic that LBJ was quoted saying he wanted to prevent another Cuba on the U.S.'s doorstep. However, Cabral was neither a communist nor a fan of Fidel Castro. Here's the recap if you didn't get it. Influence on American history. LBJ fought the war on poverty and began funding for federal projects to help the impoverished and the elderly. He also began building up U.S. infrastructure, starting conservation projects and the repair of new highways. Most importantly, LBJ signed the Civil Rights Act in 1964, ending segregation in America. Lasting legacy. LBJ ended segregation in America as well as allowed the advancement of African Americans in U.S. society. Without him, African Americans would not be guaranteed the right to vote in the South or even live in the same neighborhoods as whites in America. LBJ also increased funding for social services, helping the poor, and he also started Medicaid, which gives the elderly health care and is a program still in effect 57 years later. I'm sure many of your grandparents, such as mine, are on such programs. Thank you for coming to my presentation on Lyndon B. Johnson, the U.S.'s 36th president.